Well, welcome everyone to the first in the series of TFA forums. We have on the line with us this morning Ruth Barker and Ron Taylor. We're going to talk a little bit about items of interest for the Taylor Family Association. But first of all, I'd like to welcome you all here. And if you're viewing this later, you're more than welcome to join us. Just let us know on Friday before the second Saturday of the month, and we will invite you to be a part of the event. And for those of you who would like to know more before that time and check it out, we'll be happy to help you check it out so that you can be sure that you're with us if you'd like to join, as Ruth has today, on the forum. Okay, Ron, let's talk just to give everybody just kind of a little recap about where we are with the database. It's growing, so maybe we could share a few thoughts there. Okay, Ron, you're on.
Yeah, the database is still being maintained with legacy family tree software, and excuse me, it's really important that everybody be at the latest public release of that software, which is version 8.0.0.501. So if you're not up to date, click on the Legacy Home tab in the program, and over at the right-hand side, it will give you a place where you can update that.
And we have about how many persons in the file nowadays?
The database is about 257,300 and something.
And we're probably missing about 40% of the descendants.
The more I work on it, the more I realize we're missing. So that percentage keeps going up.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit today about gathering up some of those lost sheep. So yes. Let's talk about slicers for a second. We have gathered up quite a few slicers. Maybe we can use some examples from my experience as we're going on here. I'll just use me for an example for everyone to see what we're doing here. I am responsible for the Joseph Allen Taylor line, and Joseph Allen was a descendant of Joseph Taylor. He had about 20 some odd children, 2 wives. Well, I've been working on one line, principally, since taking on the job of slicing, and I decided I ought to look into the other line, and in the last 3 months, I've been able to find other pieces of other family members in the line. When I looked at the database, the slice that I had, I discovered that there was quite a few people missing, and I am excited to report that I now have a couple of more people that are joining the organization. We're going to be filling in 2 and 3 generations in some cases of persons which we didn't have in the database. So I'm excited about that, and there may be in your slice some cousins. When you look at the database as a slicer, that you say, oh, we don't have information on these people, and we need to explore finding a representative which has essentially the files, which I've been very fortunate to do. People who've had boxes of files or things that they didn't know what to do with. So it's very exciting to do that. Let's talk just for a minute, Ron, about what a person needs to do when they get their slice from us. there's a couple of things that I think that we maybe ought to look at to help them assess where they need to put their efforts. Do you want to do that?
How to collect the records and where to store them?
Well, when you're looking at the records, what you look for to find the holes and things that the places that you need to look.
Well, number one, we would definitely like good sources on everything, but we don't want people to stop from putting the data in if they don't have a source. We still want the data, and eventually we'll get sources for everything, but that should not stop them from putting the data in. So if, for example, if they know a certain family that's a newly married family and maybe has one child, and they don't have birth certificates and marriage certificates and everything for them, they should still enter that. Eventually, we'll collect the certificates if we can get them, but we still want the data.
So is that, Ron, is that something you want as slicers to do, is get copies of birth certificates and marriage certificates from our cousins, etc.?
If they can get them. We don't want them to go to extra effort to try to get all that information. We know that most of our people are not real genealogists. They're interested in the family, but they're not real proficient at doing professional genealogy. And we don't expect them to be. What we want them to do is to collect what they can, be as good as they can at being accurate, and eventually we'll try to collect more source information for that. Some of these older families, maybe the only thing we'll get is census information, which kind of proves that they existed at the time the census taker came around. But that does not give us good information for some of the ones that died in between censuses, because they just don't exist on a census. So some of the people we may never be able to get source records for, but we still have people living that know the history of those various families, and they need to put it in.
So that brings up a kind of a level of things that we ought to talk about. One needs, of course, the vital records, but then there are other events that are of historical value.
Yes, that's been a real problem, especially with a large file, to try to determine what things are valuable to the entire family organization and what things are valuable just to a specific family or a small, like a 3-generation family. To me, for example, it doesn't. A picture of Grandpa sitting on his tractor in the field has no value at all genealogically to me, but it might have a lot of value to the people whose grandfather that was. So, genealogically speaking, we have to somehow separate the what I call the fluff pictures from those that are more critical.
What would you consider the more critical pictures?
Well, a picture of a marriage is a lot more critical than a picture of somebody pitching hay.
Okay.
A picture
I would
of
like to suggest a couple of other things, like residences, maybe a picture of the house and the residence where the people have lived.
Yeah, a picture of a residence is interesting. Especially if it's connected with an event called resident.
Yes.
But 400 pictures of that residence probably is not very valuable.
Gotcha.
How about the LDS ordinances or ordinances in general, whether they were from LDS or non-LDS? I think those provide some additional insight about places and times where they lived and so forth.
Yeah, now ordinances are interesting. most genealogical programs allow the end user to type in an ordinance. That's not a valid ordinance. A valid ordinance is one that is in the church record. And so if an ordinance can't be verified in family tree, then it's not registered with the church. Does that make sense to you? In other words, if the church doesn't have record of the ordinance, it's not an ordinance. It's just somebody's opinion as to something that happened. So we need to make sure that our ordinances are lined up with the church record.
Okay.
And then a lot of my cousins have been giving me, where it says blessing date, or yeah, I think it's blessing date.
That's a good question.
Christening, where it says christening, they're giving me blessing date. That is not valid, right? You don't want that.
Not. We need to definitely. We do not put LDS blessings in the christening field.
Okay.
That is not the same thing. What
Right.
what we have instead is an event called LDS blessing, and that's where you put that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Christening is only for Protestant and Catholic actual christenings, and in reality, we don't need to collect those unless the birth information is not available.
Got it.
So if we have if we know the actual birth date and with some kind of proof, we don't need the christening.
Let's talk for a minute about help, a slicer getting help. I have recruited about 20 of my cousins to help in what I call sub-slicers. So I've asked them to either provide the information to me, or I provided them a sub-slice of my file, and they update it and send it back to me.
Okay, this very important point that you're making there. A slicer is simply a person that we somehow transmit a piece of our database to them, whether it's the master database or whether it's a sub-slicer's database, or it doesn't matter what it is. It's just a piece of the database that we send out to that person and ask them to fill in the missing information or make corrections to the information. And then the key part is that they send it back. We're not just distributing, we're collecting. So we've got I don't know how many slicers right now that we thought we were collecting data from, but it only went out one way, never came back.
And I'm one of them. I have been working on my cousins and their children, and I'm ready to send that back to you. I just don't know how to take it out of my.
We're going to talk about how to send it back in just a second, but the point I was trying to make is that we don't want the slicers to wait till the millennium to send this stuff back. What we want is for them to send it back on a regular basis, even if they're not finished with it, and then we'll update the database and send their slice back to them with possibly other things that they were not aware of, like additional births, deaths, marriages, notes, sources, all kinds of things might be added to the slice by other people that they were not aware of. When we update the master database with their slice, then we'll extract that slice again and send it back out with all of the added information that might have accumulated. And if that happens on a regular basis, let's say every 3 months or every 6 months, I wouldn't go longer than that. That way we're actually beginning to collaborate. So if I send a slice out to Gordon, for example, and he makes 2 changes to it, 2 marriages or maybe a new child, he needs to send that back in, with those additions, I update the master database in a matter of minutes. I cut a new slice and send it back to him so that he can continue to update.
All right, let's spend some time with Ruth's question about sending the data back to Ron. Okay?
Okay. There's two ways to send the data. One is to attach it to an email if it's small enough, because most email systems won't handle a file larger than 10 megabytes. And in today's world, 10 megabytes is really small. It used to be really big, but now it's really small. So what we're doing with files larger than 10 megabytes, or even some of the ones that are smaller than that, is we're putting those into a shared Google folder. And we can make a shared folder for each one of our slicers, so they can put the data directly into that folder, and all of the transmission happens behind the scenes with the Google Drive.
So she needs to make a backup copy of her file, right, that she's going to send.
Yeah, in Legacy, you just do a backup, which is going to create 2 files. And before I forget, underneath the shared folder called Computer Tools, there is a file in there that shows how to back up and how to restore a legacy database. That's the process we're using to send the file back and forth between our slicers and the master database. It's also the exact same process that you would use to move a database from one computer to another.
Or for the sub-slicer, right?
Yeah, any kind of transmission of the data should be done with the backup and restore. What you don't want to do is extract data from a legacy database to a GEDCOM file, because that loses information. What you want to do is back it up, and then on another computer, or even the same computer, you can restore that file back to that computer. So I have several people that have a laptop and a desktop, and they're constantly going between their computers to work on their file. What they need to do is work on the computer, then back it up, take those backup zip files to the other computer and restore them. Then they work on the second computer for a while, back it up, take the zip files back to the first computer again and restore them.
So you could use that if you were taking your laptop out to a family reunion, for example.
Exactly, yep. That's what you want to do. And the same process is done with the slicers. Yeah, the only difference with a slicer is we're only sending them a piece of the master file instead of the entire file. So we slice out, for example, you were talking about Joseph Allen Taylor. We could slice out Joseph Allen and all of his descendants into a slice and send that piece out to the Joseph Allen Taylor slicer. That slicer would take that file and restore it onto their computer. And then they would work on it, fill in the blanks, make whatever changes they want, and then eventually, 3 months or somewhere, they would back that up and send us the zip files back the same way we sent to them, either by a Google Drive.
So when you're saying that you send it out, it becomes part of my own system.
Say that again, Ruth.
It becomes part of my legacy family tree when you send that to me.
Yeah, when we send you the file, now here's a critical element. There's another file under Computer Tools called Guidelines to Collaborative Genealogy. That one's really important. It shows the methodology behind how we're doing the slicing.
Are you talking in Legacy Family Tree?
No, in Google Doc.
We have a Google Docs file, and there's a folder called Computer Tools. Inside that folder, you'll find 2 files that I've mentioned now. One is called, oops, somebody else is calling here. Can you hear that?
Yes.
I don't know who it is. Let me check real quick. Might be Gary or somebody. No, it's just a Google Voice. Yeah, it's just a Google Voice. I don't know who it is.
So let's talk about how a person sees the Google Docs. They need to get on their Google account, right?
Yeah, with the Google Docs. Anyway, I've started to say in the computer tools folder. You want me to bring that up on screen?
Yes.
Let me do that real quick here. So I'm going to share my screen somehow here. If I can get the right screen up. Okay, here's my screen coming up. And the way you do this on the Google Hangout, on the top left-hand corner of the screen, there's a green arrow for sharing. So I'm going to put the shared screen up. And then click share. That should have my screen up on your screen now. Can you see the Joseph Allen Taylor file? Okay, so I'm gonna bounce out of there and put up. This is my Gmail. So can you see my Gmail now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, in Gmail, there's two places. Right in the top left corner, there's a button called Apps. Has 9 little squares next to it. And down over here on the right-hand side, there's also those 9 squares. Both of them do the same thing. So I'm going to click on that, go to Google Drive, and under Google Drive, here's the Computer Tools folder. Can you see the icons for folders? There's quite a few of them here. So I've got a folder, for example, there's a folder that I used to share with my sister Marilyn. And I think there's another folder down here. There's one I share with my daughter Tiffany. Here's the TFA Slicers folder, the Taylor Family Association Board of Trustees folder. Anyway, all these folders are out here. The one you're looking for in your computer, it's going to be under Shared with Me. You'll see the Computer Tools folder. If I open that folder, you'll see those files I was talking about. There's guidelines for collaborative genealogy, and there's how to back up and restore a legacy database. Those two are really important. A lot of these others show you how to do other kinds of things. For example, there's one that shows you how to create a slice. So if you're going to deal with sub-slicers, that tells you how to do it. How to find and merge duplicates. Here's a good one, how to install legacy. So you don't have to spend time telling each one of your people how to install legacy. That tells you how to do it.
Very useful for sub-slicers.
Yep. So they can all get all the information they need to get going from this Computer Tools folder. And it's pretty generic. It's not just for tailors. It's for anybody using a computer.
I think Ron will do another one of these forums on Google Docs.
Okay. That means I need to spend a little time in Google Drive.
Yeah, let me show you an example of somebody that we've sent a file to. So I'm going to go back up to my drive. Here's who did I send one recently? Well, I think I sent one to Marilyn. Yeah, here's one I sent to my sister. She was asking about her genealogy. So here's a backup of just her genealogy and also the media file that goes with it. So that's her slice, and it's not very large, 6 megabytes and 185 megabytes of pictures. Quite a few pictures, actually. See, the pictures were too large to attach to an email, but the data file would have fit on an email without any problem.
Okay. I think we've answered Bruce's question, right?
In your explanation, in your tools, your Google tools, have you explained how to attach pictures. I'm having trouble getting the pictures into my legacy file from my iPhoto.
Okay, not a problem. iPhoto stores the pictures somewhere. What you need to do, number one, is figure out how it stores the pictures and where it stores them. Then, Legacy doesn't have the pictures in the database. The only thing that's in the database is the file name and where it's located. So Legacy simply uses the location of the file and goes out and gets the file from that location and displays it on screen. Okay, when you do a backup of a legacy database or a slice, what it does is it follows the file name to each one of the pictures that are attached to that slice and finds the picture and backs them up into a zip file for just that slice. That's important to understand. So let's say you had, let's say you have 10,000 pictures on your computer, but only 200 of those are connected to your slice of your legacy database. When you back up that slice, it will only find those 200 pictures and put them into the backup file.
Okay.
All right. Ron, let's talk about watching for a minute and maybe bring up that Google Doc and talk a little about that. We've recently we've been in discussion since Roots Tech with Ron Tanner, and he wanted us to work our own solution for a while about watches on Family Search, the problems that we have with duplication and so forth there. So I'll let Ron explain the problem that we've got, and then we'll talk about that solution. Show them a Google Doc. Basically, what we're saying to you, for those of you who are slicers, we're going to authorize you to manage a name in Family Search. And let's talk about what we're doing there, Ron.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to get a handle on what's happening with Family Tree because of the size of our family. I started to look at William Taylor, married to Elizabeth Patrick, and I found over 500 people that have been making changes to just his record. Okay, of those 500, about 300 of them had an email address. The other 200 I can't do anything about. I can't contact them or anything. So I took the 300 that I could find email addresses for, and I made a catalog of those, and I sent out a general email to all of them explaining what we were trying to do with William Taylor. A couple of the major problems that we found is that most people think if they go onto Family Tree that they can adjust the information any way they want, and it'll stay adjusted. No, it doesn't work that way. You could get your pedigree perfect today, and tomorrow log in and find out that it's completely different again. So anyway, what we needed to do is to try to stop all of the massive changes, or at least slow them down. Some of the changes that people were making, and they're still doing it every day, they'll go out and they'll delete the parts of the information that they don't like, or they don't want, or they think are duplicates, and they can't do anything with the duplicates because there's several reasons for that. Maybe if I get a minute, I'll explain those. So they end up deleting the stuff they don't want on their pedigree, thinking that that'll clean it up. What that does is it breaks the links for everybody else that's coming in on those connections. The second thing they do is they'll go in and they'll mark people as not a match. That essentially breaks the link also, and we end up with people that are connected to the not a match person really upset because now they're not connected to their pedigree anymore. Anyway, so we don't want any deletions. We don't want any people marking as not a match unless they're truly not a match. And like, for example, when I first started working on family tree problem, we had William Taylors that had been merged together from the 1600s all the way up to 1950. And I'm positive he's not that old. So we had a big problem. It's cleaned up quite a bit now. We still have 3 William Taylors that cannot be merged because they are in a situation with the church file they call an individual of unusual size. It doesn't mean they're a fat person. It means that they have so much data that they can't merge the 2 files together and still maintain it in their database. So their database has some file size limitations, and that's what's causing that problem. Now, Ron Tanner in our meeting at Roots Tech told us that the main problem is that the data in family tree is still being synchronized with new family search. And I'm guessing that the reason for that is that the new family search system, even though it's outdated, is still the system that is driving the temple ordinances. So any information that goes to the temple comes out of new family search, and it gets into new family search through family tree or through other extraction projects or whatever they're doing. So as long as new family search, which has the limitations in it, is synchronized with family tree, we can't merge these what they call IOUs, individuals of unusual size, cannot be merged. Ron Tanner promised that once that link has been broken between those 2 systems, then we should be able to merge some of these problems. And we're looking forward to that. He said it would be done by next year. I think Gordon and I both looked at each other and wondered if that was a pie in the sky dream.
Yep.
So anyway.
So now what our solution, Ron?
Our solution is to start pinpointing each one of these key individuals, like William Taylor, and we're going to post in their life sketch a short little explanation of what we're doing with them, and we hope that everybody that runs across those records will read that and understand what we're trying to do to help them. So as we progress forward, we're going to try to put this same type of a control in each one of William Taylor's children, and then once we get a control on that, we're going to put it in his grandchildren and etc. Eventually, we hope to have all of the major characters in this clan covered with some sort of information so that people can begin to collaborate instead of everybody trying to do their own thing.
What we're telling them is that we're going to make the slicers responsible for their slice, right?
Correct. Yeah, we want the slicer to not only be responsible, but we want the slicer to realize that we are counting on them as the authority on that slice. So they need to be diligent in what they put in the file, and they need to be diligent at watching what's happening on family tree also to see that nobody's jumping in there and messing with the data. One of the biggest problems that I'm having right now is that several people are working on various parts of the Taylor clan that are not even in their direct lines. They're just jumping all over the place doing stuff. Anyway, it's very difficult, and I've written to some of them, and they just kind of ignore it, and they just keep right on doing whatever they want. There's nothing in the system that will stop it.
Well, thank you, Ron. And we have a Google Doc on this subject that's open to the public that you can read, right? There
are several documents on these problems, and yeah, it would be I think it would be important for each of the slicers to understand the concepts that we're talking about, so that we're not trying to stop anybody from doing what they're capable of doing, but what we're trying to do is see if we can't collaborate. You know, make this thing so we don't need to have, for example, on my line, I've got John Taylor and Eleanor Burkett. At one time, there was over 40 duplicates of Eleanor Burkett. There's still quite a few of them out there. I think I still got about 10 or 15. But it's really difficult because the third thing that some of these people do is if they don't have the person exactly the way they want them, they add another one, which causes even more duplicates. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your participation, and Ruth, thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you for letting me join.
We'll continue with these forum discussions, and if people have questions, they're more than welcome to write to us, and we'll add them to our discussions as we do these monthly. We also do other hangouts on other days, and you're more than welcome to see the subject matter of those. They'll all be up on our YouTube channel, which is, you can find that by going to youtube.com/TFAPRES, TFA, Taylor Family Association Press, and find these YouTube videos. Thank you again, Ron.
Wait, after you turn off the broadcast, let's talk for just a second.
Will do.